Let's Talk Business with Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry, BCCI. Welcome as we hear the perspectives of various subject matter experts and stay up to date on the challenges and solutions around emerging and current trends in business, policies, trade, and more.
Good day and welcome to Let's Talk Business with the BCCI. I'm Michelle Spencer, and today we will be examining the subject cybersecurity, emerging trends, pitfalls, and preventative measures. To explore this topic, we have Niel Harper of Octave Consulting and Dennis Augustine, a collector of people and founder of the DX Alliance. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cybersecurity is a constantly evolving field shaped by emerging technologies, evolving threats, and new regulatory requirements. By staying informed about emerging trends, understanding common pitfalls, and implementing effective preventative measures, organizations can strengthen their cybersecurity posture and better protect against evolving threats. So let's delve in. How do emerging cyber threats differ from traditional cyber attacks?
Yeah. Well, I'll take a first crack at that since, I think Niel on so many of these topics is he's a true expert on these things. And, I've been following, though, very closely as of late over the last few years, really, the emergence of, generative AI, predictive AI. That's always been a part of our digital marketing stack. And the tools, especially, I'm a software entrepreneur with my other company, Conabos. The tools are showing remarkable progress. Well, what they've also started to do, they cannot just generate now code and text, but they can also be used to automate attacks, to spoof other people's identities at scale. And so really what was done in the past by, bad actors and, disgruntled teenagers in their basements with idle hands is now being done at scale, at the scale of the cloud globally. And that really has fundamentally changed the shape of the cyber attack landscape right now.
Yeah. So traditional threats are well known. They're well understood. There are controls in place to defend against traditional threats. But when you have emerging tech, tech like artificial intelligence, tech like quantum computing, Internet of Things, blockchain, what these do is these create new risks. These create new type of complexities in terms of the threat landscape, and it disrupts existing approaches, existing controls, and it forces cyber professionals to start to relook their approaches, the methods they use, the techniques that they're used, because some of the techniques may not be effective. So you have to really look at the shift in complexity, and you have to become more informed, and you may have to invest, whether it's in people, process, or technology, to address a shifting and much more complex trend landscape.
What do you think has contributed to this shift?
Well, certainly there's always an incentive, right? And I love that Niel said it in the order of people, processes, and technology. He's mentioned two of the most important things that we often ignore when we're talking about tech. First, you really have to address those things. These are your primary vulnerabilities. And then the technology, comes about as an enabler of those things for sure. I'll let him, I know he was just about to answer your question, but before I hand back to Niel, I just want to shout out the UE. The UE is having a Five Islands AI conference in August in Antigua. And when I speak to folks like Professor Robinson, Professor Gittins here right in Barbados, I realize that these researchers, these academics are on the bleeding edge of emerging technology. And so we have some world-class experts who are thinking deeply about how to leverage emerging technology, but also how the threats it poses and the opportunities it poses. And those people will be in Antigua at the end of July. So July, actually, it's I think it was 8th to 10th rather. So I encourage those listening who are concerned about emerging technology and how that poses a threat from a cybersecurity and opportunities perspective to attend that as well. Sorry, Niall, you were saying.
Yes. Could you repeat the question, please?
What factors do you think have contributed to the evolution of these new cyber attacks?
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about new technology. That's one important part, because what increases the complexity with new technologies, they create new vectors for attacks. They create new types of crime, cybercrime, that may not be addressed by existing legislation. It forces cyber professionals, law enforcement, industry, policymakers to start to adjust their thinking, because their traditional approaches are no longer effective. But what's also driving this is that cyber threat actors have become more organized. They're well funded. It's a large business. They're creating tools and techniques and malware, ransomware for profit. There's ransomware as a service. Someone can decide, if you're a competing business and I want to put you out of business, I can go to a ransomware group and purchase ransomware as a service and pay them to attack my competitors. It's become a more organized, focused market place for cyber criminals. And, these are the best of the best. And what's also hard as well, it's supremely difficult for attribution of cyber attacks, because most of the people are in Eastern Europe, Asia Pacific, and not just that, they obscure their location online. They may be in Eastern Europe, but they may have configured their system to pretend they're in Germany or pretend they're in Argentina. So you never know where these people are located. Makes it difficult for you to work with law enforcement to bring these people down. So it's a really complex, ever-shifting threat, that landscape. Also, the evolution and the fast evolution of technology. We continue to innovate. We're seeing artificial intelligence. We're seeing the use of tools like crypto to create a hard to track way of threat actors being paid. They usually ask for ransomware to be paid with crypto, or they ask for you to pay with Amazon gift cards or Apple gift cards, formats that are hard to trace. So there's so much complexity that's built in. It really makes it harder and harder for cyber professionals to actually defend their networks against threat actors.
And I just would add that, you mentioned, Niall, that they're so well funded and organized. Well, we've seen as of late state actors who have been involved in that. So, I mean, there's not better funded or better organized actors than adversarial states. And so that becomes now a national security issue. It becomes a fundamental infrastructure issue. Because it is things like peace, security, cybersecurity included, that creates the environment in which business prospers. And so That's why we at the BCCI, where I serve on the Digital Societies Committee, are just really so focused on making sure that all of us in the government and in the private sector recognize the importance of laying down that fundamental infrastructure, just like prudent financial management and good legislation and good roads creates an opportunity for business. So does cybersecurity. And we have to see that as an opportunity for us as well.
I'm glad that you mentioned laying down that infrastructure. So what do you think would be the best way for leaders to instill that cybersecurity mindset into their organizations?
That's a very good question.
I know Niel has a thing or two. He knows he thinks a thing or two about this kind of thing, and he might have an opinion on the matter. So I'm going to let the most outspoken one speak.
I've worked with a number of organizations across industry. I've worked in energy, worked in financial services, retail, nonprofits, international organizations, public sector. And the one thing, the common thread across industries, across jurisdictions, across language, culture, the one single thing that is responsible for the failure of an information security program is the tone from the top. If the tone from the top and from the very top, from the board of the directors, from executive management, if they don't set the tone that cyber security is of utmost importance to defending the business, and don't see it as a technology risk, it's a business risk. Cyber risk is present in finance, human resources, mergers and acquisitions, of course, IT, in marketing. There's cyber risk across your business. So don't see it as a technology risk, it's a business risk. You have to make sure that once you set that tone from the top, that it's an important business risk, you should invest and resource in the best types of cyber defense, whether it be infrastructure, technology, tools, training, the right staff. You have to prioritize technology from the top, and you have to distill that down throughout the organization as a pervasive message that it is important and everyone has a role to play.
Absolutely. And I think, Niel as a cybersecurity expert and specialist they're often in the role of the gadfly, the agitator, warning us about the risks for our own benefit. I think as well, as executives in leadership, we also need to not only have the sticks, the warning that it is a serious thing and we must treat it seriously, but also the carrots. We have to make sure that it's embedded in the culture of our organization that how do we create a great product or a service? We do it by making sure we don't just check off the boxes so that we don't get in trouble, but rather that having a complete offering is having one that is secure. Having a complete offering is one that respects the privacy of the information of our clients. That mindset, knowing that we ourselves are consumers of so much of this, that we're going to put the consumers and our own interests in privacy and security first, and instill that as a positive selling point for the things that we deliver to our the customers and constituents.
So that's the overarching way that you would approach it. But what would the day-to-day kind of training look like? What would it cover for these employees?
Yeah. So security awareness training, is important from a number of perspectives. It's important that people understand what security threats look like. So recognizing a security threat, but also knowing how to respond to a threat. Respond in terms of what to do to protect themselves, who to speak to, who can provide more expert support so that the individual can respond to these threats as they occur. And I always say, I don't train people just to protect their businesses. I train people to protect themselves, both at work and at the home. Because if you're practicing good security posture at home, it will translate to work, and vice versa. What does that training look like? So it's quizzes. Doing quizzes and repeatable. Quizzes about existing threats, emerging threats, understanding the security culture. Also doing what we call a phishing test, is doing simulations of how a phishing attack would look. And a phishing attack could be via the email, via text message, via phone call. You can even use artificial intelligence to impersonate a senior person in the business, like the CEO or another senior executive, and use those type of simulations to get people ready in terms of muscle memory to respond to the threats as they occur. Also, runs simulations, actual simulations, end-to-end simulations of what people should do in an actual event, so people know what tools are available, who to contact, how to respond, what to do after you've contained the threat and remove a threat. Then you go into the post-mortem, where you do your lessons learned, walk through that full process so people start to get comfortable with responding to threats. Because one of the biggest risks when responding to a threat is whether you fight or flight. And a lot of times, a lot of businesses will freeze because they've never practiced responding to a threat. So they don't know when one actually occurs, what are the best practices.
And this thing about practice, I mean, it's great. I've seen this over and over with enterprise customers who have wonderful security policies, have great security training, and then fail to practice. And you've heard this from Bob Parson, the founders of GoDaddy. He says anything that is measured and watched improves. And that's what you have to do. You have to continuously check in to make sure that you don't just have policies, but you also have controls and governance around those policies, and that you make that just a regular part of what you do when you do business. Just as much as when you do your quarterly business reviews and so forth, you're going to do your security reviews, and have it just be a part of your business on a day-to-day basis.
I know that persons will probably most likely think, oh, that's the purview of the tech people. It doesn't involve me here at the cashier desk or anything like that. But obviously, you're saying that it is important throughout the organization. So let's talk about encryption. What are some of the best practices for implementing encryption techniques?
So it will depend on what is the context. So if you're talking about business systems, online systems, websites, any type of digital service being offered, the best practices would be encryption at rest. So understand your data, what type of data are you storing? What's the sensitivity of that data? That data that's subject to regulatory oversight. And when you understand the type of data and you classify that data, some data may need to be encrypted while it's stored. Also, in encryption in transit, when between my laptop and your online service, if I'm sending sensitive information like credit cards, personal details, you should have the encryption in transit, so that data, when it flows between my laptop and your website, that it's encrypted. If we want to talk about personal encryption now, in terms of your laptop or my cell phone, many people don't realize that your laptop can have in the encryption, but most people don't switch it on. So you should, for example, in Microsoft Windows, there's something called BitLocker, and you can install BitLocker on your Microsoft Windows. And what happens is if you lose your laptop or someone steals your laptop and they don't know your password, they can't access your information because it's encrypted. You can also encrypt your cell phone. You can encrypt your storage on your cell phone. So if someone steals your cell phone and they don't have your PIN or your password, they can't access your cell phone information. So they would have to wipe your phone to make it usable. And when they wipe your phone, they get rid of all your personal information. So those are kind of some of the best practices around encryption.
Now, I know that once you have started with the cell phones and those sort of things, people will start to say, okay, now this involves me, because they're a little bit, up in arms when something happens to the cell phone, or even as we have experienced, whereby persons are a little bit scared with the new government IDs. So those are some of the real things that will hit home. But how then, as you mentioned, the regulatory bodies, how can governments and regulatory bodies collaborate to provide some sort of safety in the minds of Barbadians, or generally, really?
I'll start here on this one. Sometime back in my career, I started to brand myself as a customer experience architect before all of the cool kids were doing it. And why? Because I understood that, or a CX architect, because customer and constituent engagement, like Niel had said, it is things like the people and the processes that precede the platform. And that's what we need to do. We have to switch our mindset to be more customer and constituent focused, knowing that we are both of those things ourselves. And so it is a mindset shift that needs to occur. First of all, to enable better adoption and acceptance of cybersecurity as just something that we people like us do. So I think that's probably one of the key things that I would highlight. And secondly, on the collaboration front, if I will again, I will plug the UE Five Islands Conference in Antigua in August, where a lot of policymakers, educators, captains of industry will be gathering together to talk about emerging threats and technologies like AI, and the BCCI's upcoming digital conference in the fall, which we'll soon be announcing. So look out for those opportunities to get engaged, whether you be in government, in the private sector, or in technology. That is where that true collaboration to enable us to succeed happens.
Well, we've talked a lot about the risk. I'm sorry, Niel, you wanted to come in on that point?
Yeah, I'll just make a very brief point. So in 2017, I would have completed a national cyber security assessment and roadmap for Barbados on behalf of the European Commission. And that provided a comprehensive approach, a forward-looking approach to how the country should build its cyber resilience. I looked at national cybersecurity strategy, looked at cybersecurity incident response. It looked at reform in terms of legislative reform. How do we improve our laws, whether it be privacy laws or cyber crime laws? It looked at international cooperation. How does Barbados get more involved in multilateral fora? How does Barbados get involved in any international treaties on cyber? How do different jurisdictions work on combating cyber crime? It looked at national security awareness training. Looked at how do we reform our education system to have more cybersecurity courses in bachelor's degrees. How do we get masters that are in specializations for cyber? So I looked across a broad range of different aspects of Barbadian society, how we can build more resilience to cyber threats. And that's really what the government needs to do. You need to have a national cybersecurity strategy. The United States has one, United Kingdom, many countries in Africa, Asia Pacific, Europe, to have a very comprehensive strategy. Also look at things like workforce development. How do you develop the right set of skills from university, from community colleges, to build a cyber workforce that can go into your businesses and help defend them against cyber threats? Or some of these people can even start cyber security consulting businesses, cybersecurity tech firms, to build out a broader kind of scale of resilience to cyber threats in your nation. And that's something I think that Barbados needs to continuously evolve, because I think we're somewhat stagnant in terms of really the execution and the prioritization in terms of investment in cyber resilience.
Well, I think you've started going down the line of my final question, whereby how can we then, start to look at the opportunities that are there in terms of cybersecurity, rather than just focusing on the threats and so on all the time? What are some of those other opportunities?
Yeah, I'll start. First thing first, we have to acknowledge that it's a priority. It has to be that acknowledgement, not just by our government leaders, but our leaders in industry, that this is a national priority. You have to invest resources. You have to look at how do we create, again, I mentioned workforce development. We have to have a workforce development strategy, not just to address our local market, but also to export some of this talent. You also have to look at how do we invest in cybersecurity businesses? What's needed from an investment perspective, whether it be angel investment, whether it be venture capital, whether it be supported by funding from the government of Barbados? How do we create an entrepreneurship ecosystem that supports the building out of a cybersecurity industry? How do we create tech type of industries? A lot of people, a lot of nations have what you call like tech centers. There's where they provide like tax-free concessions for tech companies like Microsoft and Google to come and invest in your country, to build out buildings and to start to do knowledge exchange, capacity development, to build your country up to be a cybersecurity leader. How do we create those type of opportunities for our nation, that instead of being a passive consumer of tools that someone else builds, we're building our own tools that reflect our own unique culture or identity, and we start to create our own identity as a cybersecurity hub.
100%. And I think just lastly, we have an opportunity, as Niel had mentioned, to not just, we've been doing a good job in teaching some people some basic cybersecurity. It's really important that we move them along to more advanced levels, that we engage experts like Niel and best practices from around the world. And then we not only just seek to work for others, but understand that we are capable here of creating the companies and services that are going to be so desperately needed in this new fifth industrial revolution. And so we're able to do that right here from Barbados, from the Caribbean. And so while the threats might be immense, the opportunities are even larger. The IT outsourcing market in North America alone, in just the next 2 years, is estimated to be over $300 billion. That is more than the GDP of this region. 2% of that would exceed the GDP of this nation. And so I can say that we have a barrier-free opportunity that has been flung wide open in front of us. And so while the threats are many, the opportunities are great as well. And we should attack this moment with the vigor that it deserves.
Well, I certainly hope that we will capitalize on those opportunities. Today, we examine the subject cybersecurity, emerging trends, pitfalls, and preventative measures. Chatting with me today, I had Niel Harper of Octave Consulting and Dennis Augustine, collector of people and founder of the DX Alliance. I say thank you so much, gentlemen. We've certainly learned a lot, and we could go on for perhaps another half an hour.
Easily.
I
Yes.
thank you.
We definitely
You've been listening to Let's Talk Business with the BCCI. My name is Michelle Spencer.
That's it for another edition of Let's Talk Business with Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry, BCCI. Join us again next time as we hear the perspectives of various subject matter experts and stay up to date on the challenges and solutions around emerging and current trends in business, policies, trade, and more.